Have you ever noticed that your life feels stuck exactly where it matters most? Not in the small things, not in trivial decisions, but in the email that could change your career, the phone call that could unlock your financial life, the decision that could free you from a relationship, a situation, or an old version of yourself. And still, you delay. Not because you're lazy, not because you lack discipline, but because something deeper, invisible to the eye, is operating quietly inside your mind. By the end of this video, you will understand why your life hasn't changed yet, and more importantly, you'll hold a key that doesn't depend on motivation, willpower, or superficial techniques. A key that works at the level where reality is actually created. Now pause for a moment and imagine this scene. It's Sunday night. The silence feels heavy. Time moves slower, denser. You know there's something important you need to do tomorrow. Your body knows it. Your stomach knows it. There's a subtle inner tension, barely noticeable yet constant. And still, you don't act. You grab your phone, scroll through social media, watch one more video, then another, maybe a series, maybe organizing something that didn't need organizing. Anything, absolutely anything, except the one action that could change your life. And when the night ends, it hits. The weight, the quiet guilt, the silent frustration, the empty promise, tomorrow I'll do it. But tomorrow comes, and the cycle repeats. If this feels familiar, it's not coincidence. You are not failing, you are obeying an invisible program. Carl Jung uncovered something modern psychology still struggles to fully understand. Procrastination is not a time management problem, it is an identity problem. It doesn't originate in your calendar, it originates in your psyche. When you procrastinate, your conscious mind is not in control. Something older, deeper, and archetypal is. Jung called this force the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It is everything you were taught to reject about yourself. Fear, insecurity, feelings of unworthiness, memories of failure, all pushed into the unconscious. And here is the truth few people are willing to face. You are not postponing tasks. You are postponing versions of yourself. Because every meaningful action requires a symbolic death. The death of the identity that feels small. The death of the identity that learned to survive by hiding. At the deepest level, your unconscious associates, success, visibility, and forward movement with threat. The threat of failure, the threat of being seen, the threat of confirming an old belief, I'm not enough. So it does what it was designed to do. It protects you. But protection has a cost. It creates distractions. It creates exhaustion without physical effort. It creates resistance with no logical explanation. This is the tragic paradox of procrastination. In trying to protect you from emotional pain, it traps you in stagnation. Jung warned that what you refuse to face consciously returns as fate. And this is where the conversation becomes even deeper. Modern physics shows us something unsettling. The atoms that form your reality are mostly empty space. Nothing becomes solid until it's observed. Nothing becomes defined until consciousness collapses it into form. Your life isn't just happening out there. It's being recreated internally, moment by moment, by the observer you are. When you react only to the physical world, the surface level of repetition, scarcity, and habit, you reinforce the same field of possibilities. You wake up in the same body, live the same problems, attract the same situations, not because the world is against you, but because your current identity can only access this version of reality. Procrastination, in this context, is a signal. It reveals a misalignment between who you are and who you could become. It is proof that your consciousness is still bound to an old self. And here is the shift that changes everything. You don't defeat procrastination by doing more. You defeat procrastination by being different. Before action, there is identity. Before external change, there is an internal collapse. That's why shallow methods fail, lists fail, motivation fails, discipline fails, because none of them touch the place where reality is born. In the next blocks, you will understand why reacting to the physical world keeps you trapped in the same cycle, why the symbolic death of the ego is unavoidable for real transformation, and how to access the invisible field where your new identity already exists. The real question is no longer, why do I procrastinate? The real question is, who must I stop being so my life can finally move forward? And the answer is not effort, it is awareness. There is a kind of voice that never raises its volume. It doesn't threaten, it doesn't push, it doesn't demand, it only whispers. It appears at the exact moment you are about to move forward. When you open the document, when you pick up the phone, when you sense that this action could change the direction of your life. And almost imperceptibly, it says, later. Not now. You're not ready yet. This is one of the most destructive expressions of the shadow, not because it stops you directly, but because it convinces you of something far more dangerous, that you are not enough. Every time you procrastinate, something subtle but powerful happens inside your psyche. You're not just postponing a task, you're entering into a silent agreement with that inner voice, an agreement that says, I don't trust myself. I don't keep my promises. I'm not someone who finishes what they start. And the unconscious learns quickly. It doesn't understand language. It understands repetition. So with every delay, you reinforce an identity. The identity of the one who always postpones, the one who quietly betrays himself, the one who never fully shows up. And here's the part almost no one notices. Procrastination doesn't erode your time. It erodes your self-worth. But now, pay close attention, because this is where the shift begins. The next time you feel that automatic urge to escape, to grab your phone, to distract yourself, to abandon the moment, I don't want you to fight it. Fighting strengthens it. Resisting feeds it. Ignoring it pushes it deeper into the unconscious. Instead, do something radically different. Pause, breathe, and ask one simple, penetrating question. What am I avoiding feeling right now? It's not the task, it never was. It's the emotion the task awakens. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of being seen, fear of discovering that you actually can and no longer having excuses. Sometimes the fear isn't of failing. It's of succeeding, because success demands something failure never does: responsibility. Responsibility to maintain a new standard. Responsibility to stop hiding behind the story of being a victim. Name the emotion. Give it language, fear, shame, anxiety, a sense of not being enough, and then internally, so without drama, force, or performance, say, I accept this fear, and I choose to act anyway. This single gesture has enormous power, because the shadow feeds on rejection. It grows in darkness. It controls when you run. But the moment you accept it, it loses authority. Acceptance is not surrender. It is integration. Carl Jung taught that what is brought into consciousness loses its destructive power. When you name the emotion, you stop being possessed by it and begin to observe it. An observation changes everything, because the observer doesn't react. The observer chooses. Now something even deeper is happening beneath the surface. Your procrastination is directly tied to your self-image. Jung called the process of becoming who you truly are individuation. And that process demands one unavoidable thing: facing exactly what you fear most. And do you know what you're really afraid of? You're afraid of discovering that you're capable of more than you believe. Because if you are capable, you can no longer pretend you didn't know. You can no longer hide. You can no longer blame the world. Be brutally honest. If you finally write that book, you'll have to write another. If you finally launch that project, you'll have to sustain it. If you finally have that difficult conversation, you'll have to live with the consequences. Procrastination becomes a comfortable prison, painful but familiar. It keeps you inside an identity you already know, even if that identity hurts. But here is the truth no one tells you. Every time you delay something that matters, you are not avoiding the task. You are avoiding a higher version of yourself. You are choosing to remain, the one who breaks promises to himself, the one who doesn't trust his own word, the one who stays beneath his potential, and the unconscious records this choice, not as guilt, but as destiny. In the next blocks, you will understand why reacting only to the physical world, the third dimension of repetition, locks this cycle in place, and how to access the level where identity changes before action does. Because the real question is no longer, how do I stop procrastinating? The real question is, who must die so my life can finally begin? There is a quiet moment, almost invisible, where you decide who is in control of your life. It's not dramatic. It doesn't feel important. No one witnesses it. But it happens every time you choose to delay or to act despite fear. Carl Jung understood something essential about human existence. There are only two ways to live. Either we live unconsciously, reacting to impulses, fears, and conditioning, or we awaken and become architects of our own experience. Every act of procrastination is a silent vote for unconsciousness. Every act of action, even with fear present, is a vote for awakening. And here is the unsettling truth. There is no neutrality. You are always voting, even when you believe you are simply resting or waiting for the right time. Now listen carefully, because this next part is not symbolic. It is transformative. Take a piece of paper, or do this mentally if you must, and list everything you are postponing. Don't filter, don't justify, don't minimize the call, the project, the conversation, the decision, the care you owe yourself. Now, next to each item, write one simple question. Who would I be if this were already done? More confident? More reliable, more free, more grounded, more self-respecting? Sit with that list, because here comes the revelation that changes everything. That person is not in the future. They already exist inside you. They don't need to be created. They need to stop being betrayed. The archetype of the one who finishes, the one who honors their word, the one who acts in alignment with what they feel, is already alive within you. But every time you delay, you choose against it. You side with the smaller identity, the identity that survives but never truly lives. And that is why procrastination hurts so deeply. Because, on some level, you know. Now we arrive at the third truth, the most uncomfortable and the most liberating. Procrastination is a form of emotional self-violence. This is not exaggeration. This is not metaphor. Every time you know what must be done, and choose not to do it, you break an internal pact. You tell your unconscious, don't trust me. My word has no weight. I abandon myself, and the unconscious believes you. Jung observed that many people live in a permanent state of inner war. One part of them wants to grow, to evolve, to expand. Another part fears change, clings to the familiar, sabotages every movement toward the unknown. Procrastination is the battlefield between these two forces. And here is the cost of that war. It consumes enormous energy. Not energy used to create, not energy used to act, but energy spent resisting. It's like driving with one foot on the accelerator and the other on the brake. The engine screams, overheats, but the car never moves. You feel exhaustion without physical effort, fatigue without progress, weight without fulfillment. Jung called this wasted psychic energy. The energy meant for action gets trapped in internal conflict, every contradictory thought, every repressed emotion, every delayed decision, all of it drains you. And then comes the cruel illusion: I don't act because I'm tired. When the truth is, far more unsettling, you are tired because you don't act. Now connect this to something even deeper. In modern physics, energy without direction does not create. It produces chaos. The same is true inside you. When your consciousness wants to move forward, but your old identity resists, the result is not balance, it is stagnation. And prolonged stagnation becomes suffering. That is why procrastination hurts. It is not passive, it is violent. Violent because it denies your potential. Violent because it blocks your evolution. Violent because it keeps you tied to a version of yourself that should have already died. But here is the turning point. This inner war does not need to continue. It only exists because you have not yet chosen, consciously, which side you are on. Awakening is not the absence of fear. It is action without negotiation. In the next blocks, you will understand why psychic energy leaks keep your life frozen, how to align consciousness and identity, and how to cross the symbolic death Jung called nigredo. Because true liberation doesn't come from forcing yourself harder, it comes from ending the inner war. And that begins with one simple, radical decision. Stop abandoning yourself. Every action consumes energy, but there is something that consumes far more: resistance. When you procrastinate, you are not merely wasting time, you are wasting vital energy, psychic energy, emotional energy, conscious energy. And the most insidious part is this: that energy doesn't disappear. It becomes trapped in inattention, trapped in silent conflict, trapped in the thought, I know what I should do, but I don't. Have you ever noticed something strange? After a full day of procrastinating, you feel exhausted, often more exhausted than after a truly productive day. That is not coincidence. Procrastination is draining because it requires constant effort not to act. Energy to suppress fear, energy to negotiate with yourself, energy to maintain the identity that avoids. Carl Jung understood that psychic energy is a finite resource. It must flow. When it is blocked, it turns inward and begins to work against the individual. That is why procrastination is never neutral. It creates erosion. It corrodes from within. You don't feel bad because you procrastinated. You procrastinated because something in you was already in conflict. Now, here is a crucial realization. The real obstacle was never the task, never the complexity, never the lack of time. The true obstacle is always the beginning, the precise moment when the old identity senses it is about to lose control. That is where this next practice enters. Simple in form, profound in effect. I call it the 5-minute threshold. When resistance appears, do not attempt to conquer the entire task. Do not force completion. Do not dramatize. Commit to one thing only, 5 minutes, nothing more. But here is the key most people miss. During those 5 minutes, there is no negotiation, no distraction, no self-criticism, no checking the clock. You are fully there, present, conscious, aligned, just you and the task. 5 real minutes. What happens next is almost always the same. Resistance weakens, tension dissolves, the body relaxes, and in most cases, you continue. Because the real enemy was never the task. It was inertia. In physics, a body at rest tends to remain at rest. A body in motion tends to remain in motion. The same principle governs consciousness. Once movement begins, momentum shifts sides. The energy that once resisted now begins to support. But even if you stop after 5 minutes, something essential has already occurred. You broke the pattern. You sent a new signal to your unconscious. I do what I say. I honor my commitments. I can trust myself. And that changes everything, because self-trust is not built through grand victories, it is built through small agreements kept. Now we must move into deeper territory, and this is where discomfort often arises. Your procrastination is intimately tied to your relationship with personal power. Jung observed that many people do not fear failure, they fear their own power, because power demands responsibility, power demands consciousness, power demands ownership of consequences. It is far easier to live as a victim of circumstances than as the creator of one's reality. When you procrastinate, you unconsciously choose powerlessness. You choose not to decide, not to act, not to commit. And this choice has a devastating psychological effect. It preserves a comforting illusion. I didn't fail, it just didn't happen. It wasn't the right time. It wasn't possible. When the truth is far more uncomfortable, you did not move forward, because doing so would require becoming who you truly are. It would require abandoning the story of limitation, sustaining a higher identity, carrying the consequences of success. Because success is not only pleasure, it is expanded responsibility. More decisions, more exposure, more inner demand. Procrastination becomes a refined form of self-sabotage. It allows you to remain small without admitting that you chose to remain small. Notice something important. When you act for others, you move. You meet deadlines, you deliver, you show up. Why? Because for others you accept responsibility. For yourself you hesitate, not because you are incapable, but because you are conflicted with your own power. At its core, procrastination protects you from a dangerous question. What if I really can? Because if you can, there will be no more excuses, no alibis, no escape. In the next blocks, we will cross the point of no return, the moment where the old identity must dissolve so that something more authentic can emerge. Jung called this stage nigredo, the necessary darkness, the dissolution of the false self, because no real creation exists without assuming the power to create, and that requires courage. Have you ever noticed how much easier it is to keep promises made to others than the promises you make to yourself? When you act for someone else, there is a quiet relief. You execute, you deliver, you move, but when the task is for you, when it touches your future, your identity, your freedom, something tightens inside. And this happens for a very deep reason. When you act for others, you don't have to confront your own power. You are simply responding to an external demand. But when you act for yourself, you are forced to face an uncomfortable truth. You are capable of creating the life you want. And that realization is frightening. Carl Jung referred to this as the neurosis of failure. Not because a person consciously wants to fail, but because failing without trying is psychologically safer than trying and discovering your real limits. Here is how this operates in the unconscious. If you try and fail, you must face reality, adjustment, learning, responsibility. But if you never try, you get to preserve a big, powerful fantasy. I would have succeeded if I really wanted to. I could do it, just not now. I have potential. I just haven't used it yet. Procrastination becomes a sophisticated defense mechanism. It protects the ego, preserves self-image, avoids confrontation with truth, and so you remain stuck in an emotional limbo. You never fully claim your power, but you also never truly face your limitations. A gray zone, a lukewarm existence. No real defeat, but no real victory either. And here is the cost. You don't live fully, because fully living requires choice, and choice requires responsibility. Now comes the shift that changes everything. Every time you act despite fear, something fundamental happens. Every time you do what needs to be done, even without motivation, you break an old pattern. In that moment, you reclaim personal power. You send a clear message to yourself and to reality. I am not an effect of circumstances. I am not a passive observer. I am the author of my own story. This is not abstract philosophy. This is identity in motion, because identity is not what you think about yourself. It is what you prove to yourself repeatedly. Now we arrive at the fourth exercise, and this one removes all masks. Identify the most important thing you have been avoiding, the one you know deep down. If it were completed, your life would not be the same. Do not choose something small. Choose what truly matters. Now ask yourself 2 questions. Answer with brutal honesty. First question, what am I protecting myself from by not doing this? Rejection, judgment, success, the responsibility that would come with it. Now the second question, even more revealing. What kind of power would I have if this were completed? More autonomy, financial freedom, self-respect, control over your own life? Your answers reveal exactly why you procrastinate. And here is the point of no return. Once you see this clearly, you can no longer hide behind excuses. Procrastination stops being unconscious. It becomes a choice. You now know exactly what you are doing when you choose not to act, and that demands a decision. Not tomorrow, not later, now. Do you want to claim your power or continue being a victim of your own resistance? This is the true crossroads. If this content is touching something deep in you, share it with someone who is also trapped in this cycle. Sometimes, an external nudge is the catalyst that allows someone to cross a fear they have postponed for years. Now we reach the 5th and final turning point, the point that connects everything, the point where understanding becomes method. The final truth is this. Ending procrastination is not about willpower. Willpower is unstable. It depends on mood, energy, circumstances. What truly ends procrastination is a conscious shift in identity. And that is exactly what we will reveal in the next block, the definitive method to align consciousness, identity, and action so that procrastination no longer makes sense. When you're ready, send the next block. We will move into the closing transformation, from wanting to being, from scarcity to creation, from repetition to individuation. Overcoming procrastination was never about willpower, never discipline, never motivation. It has always been about inner alignment. Carl Jung uncovered something that completely changes how we understand human behavior. When there is conflict between the conscious mind and the unconscious always wins, always. You can make lists, build routines, promise yourself that this time will be different, but if, deep down, there is a part of you that doesn't believe it deserves success, a part that fears change, a part that feels strangely safe inside familiar failure, that part will sabotage every conscious plan, without exception. That is why so many productivity techniques work for a few days and then collapse. They are trying to solve a deep emotional conflict with shallow, rational tools. It's like trying to heal an emotional wound with a bandage. The surface looks better, but the root remains open. The real solution was never to eliminate procrastination. It was to understand it. Procrastination is not the problem. It is a signal, a messenger from the unconscious. It points to rejected parts of you, unheard fears, unacknowledged doubts, fragments of the shadow that are simply trying to feel safe. Jung taught an uncompromising law of the psyche. What you resist persists. The more you fight procrastination, the more energy you give it. The more you judge yourself, the deeper the inner split becomes. But when you accept that there is a part of you that is afraid, when you stop treating it like an enemy, something shifts. Resistance begins to dissolve, because the shadow does not want to destroy you. It wants to protect you. It is simply using outdated strategies. Now we arrive at the final method, the one that integrates everything you have learned so far. I call this the conscious inner dialogue. The next time you feel the urge to procrastinate, do not force yourself to act. Do not criticize yourself. Do not judge. Do something radically different. Stop, close your eyes, breathe, and visualize two parts of yourself. One part wants to act. It sees the future. It wants growth, expansion, movement. The other part wants to delay. It feels fear. It wants safety. It wants to avoid pain. Now, instead of one trying to silence the other, you give both a voice. Let the active part speak. This matters for our future. If we don't do this now, nothing changes. Then let the procrastinating part respond. I'm afraid. I'm afraid of failing. I'm afraid of not being enough. I'm afraid of what will happen if it actually works. Do not interrupt. Do not correct. Just listen. That act alone is integration. Now comes the key moment. Instead of using force, you negotiate. Maybe the procrastinating part says, okay, but not everything. Let's do just 10 minutes today. Then we reassess. And the active part agrees. Perfect. 10 conscious minutes are infinitely more powerful than 0 minutes driven by perfectionism. In that moment, something profound happens. You stop being divided. The inner war ends. Psychic energy, once fragmented, begins to align. And when consciousness and the unconscious move in the same direction, action becomes natural. No drama, no exhaustion, no sabotage. This is the real secret. Procrastination disappears, not because you became stronger, but because you became whole. Now we take this one level deeper. In quantum physics, a particle exists as possibility until it is observed. Observation collapses the field of possibilities into a specific reality. The same applies to you. As long as you see yourself as someone who procrastinates, that identity remains reinforced. But the moment you act, even briefly, the identity collapses. You stop being someone who tries and become someone who does. Not because you did a lot, but because you acted in alignment. Identity does not change through dramatic gestures. It changes through small, repeated acts of internal coherence. This is the end of the journey. You do not need to become someone new. You need to stop betraying yourself. The version of you who honors commitments, who acts despite fear, who keeps their word, already exists. It is simply waiting for you to act like them. From now on, whenever resistance appears, you know what to do. Do. Not fight. Do not escape. Do not judge. Listen. Integrate. Act through small, conscious agreements. This is the true process of individuation. And when you choose it, something shifts quietly inside your inner field. External reality begins to respond, not by magic, but by alignment. Because when the observer changes, the observed world changes with it. And procrastination, once seen as an unbeatable enemy, reveals itself for what it always was, an internal request for consciousness. Now, the choice is yours. Continue reacting, or finally step into the role of author of your own life. The path is open. This technique works because it does something most people never dare to do. It honors every part of your psyche. It does not try to eliminate fear. It does not try to crush doubt. It does not try to overpower resistance through force. Instead, it recognizes something essential. Fear exists for a reason. And the moment you stop treating fear as an enemy and start treating it as a part of you that wants protection, something profound happens. The inner war ends. As long as your psyche is divided, one part wants to move forward while another wants to retreat. One part wants growth while another wants survival. One part sees possibilities while another sees threats. In that state, all of your energy is consumed by resistance. But when these parts stop fighting each other, energy changes its quality. Carl Jung observed that when we integrate seemingly contradictory aspects of the personality, we access a completely different kind of energy. Not the energy of willpower, not the energy of pressure, not the energy of I have to, but the energy of inner wholeness. This energy does not burn out, because it does not arise from conflict but from harmony. Willpower requires constant effort. The energy of wholeness flows. It does not push, it guides. When you stop fighting yourself and begin working with yourself, procrastination loses its purpose, not because you defeated something, but because there is nothing left to resist. Resistance only exists where there is division. When there is integration, clarity emerges. With clarity comes purpose, and with purpose, movement becomes natural. You no longer have to drag yourself into action. You move because it makes sense. Now notice something important. What has happened here is not just learning how procrastination works, it is a process of self-recognition. You began believing there was something wrong with you, that you lacked discipline, that you lacked motivation, that you lacked strength. And now you see something far deeper. Behind every pattern of self-sabotage, there is a part of you trying to protect you. Protect you from rejection, protect you from exposure, protect you from pain, and sometimes even protect you from success. Real transformation never comes from attacking these parts. It comes from integrating them. When you judge, you repress. When you repress, you fragment. When you fragment, you lose energy. But when you understand, you integrate. And when you integrate, you become whole. Seen from this perspective, procrastination stops being an enemy. It reveals itself as what it always was, a messenger. It is saying, there is something here that needs attention. There is a part of you that has not been heard. There is a fear asking to be acknowledged. And the way you respond to that message changes everything. When you respond with internal violence, the pattern repeats. When you respond with conscious compassion, the pattern dissolves. As you listen to this now, there is a version of you quietly present, a version that no longer fights itself, a version that no longer sabotages itself, a version that no longer needs to force action. This version acts from inner integrity, not from pressure, not from fear, not from obligation. It trusts itself because it has learned something fundamental, to honor all of its parts. This version is not in the future. It does not depend on external achievements. It does not require perfect conditions. It exists now. It asks only one thing of you, the courage to choose it. Choosing it means stopping self-betrayal, stopping self-abandonment, stopping the war against who you are. It means becoming your own ally, the most powerful ally you could ever have. Because when you stop being your own inner enemy, the external world loses its power to paralyze you. Carl Jung said something that summarizes this entire journey. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and who you truly are is not someone who procrastinates, not someone broken, not someone incapable. Who you truly are is someone who acts from self-respect, inner integrity, and trust in oneself. In the next and final block, we close the circle. We move completely from wanting to being, from endless seeking to conscious creation, from fragmentation to individuation. There is a silent moment when everything changes, not when you feel ready, not when fear disappears, not when circumstances become perfect, but when you choose. Every time you act despite fear, every time you keep a promise to yourself, every time you treat your goals as something sacred, you are choosing who you are, not tomorrow, not in some ideal future, now. Because identity is not something you discover, it is something you embody. Throughout this journey, one truth has become clear. Procrastination was never the problem. It was the signal, the invitation, the doorway. It pointed to an inner misalignment between who you believe you are and who, deep down, you know you can be. And now you know something that cannot be forgotten. You have the ability to create the life you desire, not through force, but through alignment. When consciousness and the unconscious move together, action stops feeling heavy. It becomes inevitable. Now, here is the challenge. Simple, direct, real. Before this day ends, choose one thing, just one. The thing you have been postponing, the thing you know matters, the thing that, if begun, would shift something inside you. Not everything, not the whole plan, just one step. Speak to both parts of yourself, the part that wants to act and the part that is afraid. Listen to both, then make a conscious agreement. 5 minutes, with full presence, no distraction, no negotiation. 5 minutes of integrity are worth more than hours of empty intention. When you do this, and notice, it is not if, but when, something breaks, not the fear, the pattern, you prove something to yourself that no external motivation ever can. I can trust myself. And that is the foundation of all real transformation. If you made it this far and felt something shift inside you, write in the comments, "I choose to act from self-respect." Do not write it for me. Write it for yourself. That simple act is an inner seal, a declaration of identity, a conscious collapse of possibilities. I want to see how many here are ready to stop being victims of their own resistance and step into the role of creators of their own reality. If this video opened a new perspective, if it named something you were feeling but could not articulate, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here we do not talk about the surface, we talk about the root. Every week we explore tools, ideas and paths that do not try to fix you, but help you remember who you are. And if you know someone trapped in cycles of procrastination, someone who judges themselves, pressures themselves, abandons themselves, share this video. Sometimes what a person needs is not more pressure, but a new way of seeing themselves. Carl Jung said something that closes this journey perfectly. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And becoming who you truly are is not about perfection, not about eliminating fear, not about never failing. It is about acting from self-respect, from inner integrity, from trust built through small, honored commitments. You are not lazy, you are not weak, you are not broken. You are human, facing the most complex task there is, becoming whole. And that process does not require inner violence. It requires compassion, awareness, and the courage to work with yourself instead of against yourself. Your future self is not far away. It is watching right now, waiting for the decision only you can make. Do not make it wait any longer.